Hi, I'm Jada Conley, and today I'm here to present to you a case study. Let's look at the facts. Who was involved in this case? Well, we have Mr. Sample, who was the principal of 3 years, Mrs. Lynn, the librarian and media specialist, Mrs. Brandon, new 3rd grade teacher to the district, Mrs. Williams, a 3rd grade teacher with many years' experience at St. Regis, Mrs. Evans, the PTA president. What is going on here? Well, the school purchased software for the computer lab with school and fundraised money. At teacher request, Mrs. Lynn copied and distributed software to the classrooms. Mrs. Brandon reported to Mr. Sample possible copyright violations. When did this happen? Copies started being made about 4 months after purchase during the school year, and they were made during the school day. Where? Copies were made in the library on school computers and used in classrooms on school computers. The voices of this case, Mrs. Brandon says, "I've refused the copies, but I'm uncomfortable knowing that they're being used in other classrooms in violation of copyright laws. This was not okay at my previous school." Mrs. Williams, "I'm thankful that Mrs. Lynn was willing to make copies of the programs so all the teachers could use them." Mrs. Lynn, "I am proud that I can save our budget so much money and benefit more students by making these copies. We're a small town, so who's really going to check or care that we have these copies?" Mrs. Evans, "I was happy to help Mrs. Lynn, and we're working hard to fundraise for our students. She is making these dollars stretch." And Mr. Sample, "I didn't know the copies were being made. I cannot have us violating copyright laws, even though it was done with the best of intentions. I also know that people may get upset. And I was finally gaining the respect with this community after being an outsider. I do not want to damage relationships that have been built." Let's look at the legal and ethical issues. 3 main legal issues I see here. First, violation of copyright laws. So copyright laws protect anything the moment it was created. Software licenses. Software falls out of the free use category because software copyright must be obtained from the publisher in order to make copies. And third, a breach of contract. School policies often have a statement such as, "Illegal copies of copyrighted programs may not be made or used on school equipment." So the teachers using these copies are in violation of school policy, which is a breach of their teaching contracts. Other issues to keep in mind: Mrs. Lynn knowingly made copies even after Mrs. Brandon told her it was a copyright violation. And also, Mrs. Lynn threatened to call the PTA when Mr. Sample confronted her, so a little bit of that kind of harassment and threat there. On a positive note, Mr. Sample did not use Mrs. Brandon's name when talking to Mrs. Lynn and worked to kind of keep that more of an issue that didn't poke names at specific staff. In summary, after the discovery of copyright violations by Mrs. Lynn and possible other teachers, Mr. Sample must address copyright issues and related budget and resource management by creating a plan that all stakeholders can support and uphold. I chose this as my summary because while the copyright violation brought this to the forefront and must be addressed, the reasons behind the copyright violation had everything to do with budget and resource management. We know from this case study that this is a small school with budget concerns. We know the fundraising helps them get the things they need for their students. And those things are those resources. And so there's an underlying issue there while solving that copyright issue that an admin and a school board and a system must make sure that their budget and their resources are being used correctly under laws and policies. So let's look at the data. What do we know? The people in this scenario, we know that Mrs. Brandon reported the concern of the violation and is not using the copyrights, and is using, holy cow, Mrs. Brandon reported the concern of the violation and she is not using the copies. Mrs. Lynn made the copies and distributed them to the teachers. Mrs. Williams was happy to accept them and use them and as copied software. Mrs. Evans, the PTA president, was also happy to help make the copies, and Mr. Sample was unaware of the actions that were happening in his building. What do we need to find out? Other teaching staff? We need to know exactly how many people are using the copies and their feelings. PTA. We need to know if the PTA knows how their money has been spent and if they understand the copyright laws. And the school board superintendent. We need to know if they're aware, if they know the policies, and where they stand on this issue. Places. We know the library was used because this is where the copies were made on school computers. We know the computer lab is involved in this because this is where those original copies are housed. We know Mrs. Williams' classroom is using the flash drives of the copied software and that Mrs. Brandon's classroom is not. What do we need to find out? We need to find out which classrooms in the school are currently using copies. We need to find out if there's any other computers, maybe a traveling SPED teacher or something like that, that are loaded with copies of the software. We need to know if any teachers put copies on their own personal devices and are using them at home. And we need to know if there's any other places besides the library on or off campus where these copies were being made. Programs. We know that Mrs. Brandon has 2 programs and Mrs. Williams has 2 programs that were purchased with instructional allocation funds for their classrooms. We know that all 4 of those programs have been copied and distributed to 2nd, 3rd, and 4th grade classrooms. What do we need to find out? We need to find out all other programs that were copied and how many copies exist. We need to know who has copies of these programs. We need to know the copyright license restriction for each individual program in the building, how many licenses we have for each of those programs, and what funds were used to purchase flash drives. Let's talk about stakeholder considerations. As an administrator, there's an obligation to act with integrity and uphold ethical principles. Challenges that Mr. Sample may face. First, Mrs. Lynn could feel attacked or upset. She felt like she was doing a great thing, and now she's been told that she has to stop what she's doing. Second, PTA, parents, and patrons may feel underappreciated, that their money isn't seemingly going as far as they'd like. We know Mrs. Evans was happy to help. If the PTA and other patrons follow along with that mindset, they may feel that by destroying the copies, they're actually spending their money less wisely. Mrs. Brandon may feel backlash from peers. She was the one who brought it up. She's new to the district, and she may feel that backlash or discrimination for being kind of the whistleblower in this situation. Also, there could be some stakeholders who are frustrated because Mr. Sample did not know this was happening. And on the same side, there could be others who are frustrated if he doesn't look the other way. Second, as an administrator, there are obligations to know the school law and make sure that policies are consistent with those laws. So it is now important to meet with the school board and superintendent to review all policies, to meet with staff and review and enforce policy, to meet with the PTA and other patrons to review and dialogue about the policies. Priorities at this point. First, meet with staff to get all the information about where and when these copies are being used. Second, meet with the school board to make them aware of situations, discuss policies, and dialogue about the next course of action. And third, visit with concerned patrons as they contact the school, assuring them that we're working on an amicable solution that upholds the values of our school and the best interests of our students. Let's look at the options. We have 5 plans laid in front of us. Plan number 1 is the status quo. The key features of this plan are to continue with the current procedure of making copies of purchased software to distribute to classrooms. Plan 2, the key features, continue using the copies that are already in existence, but any future purchases will not be copied. Plan 3, key features, eliminate all copies, delete from computers, clear the flash drives, review copyright laws and acceptable use policy, place reminder signage near computers, software, storage places, and copy machines. Plan 4, the same as Plan 3, eliminating the copies, reviewing the copyright laws, and placing reminder signage. In addition, contact software companies for information about additional licenses, and require administration signature on all purchases that are things used at school. Plan 5, eliminate all the copies, contact the software companies, review the copyright laws, An additional thing here is to add a software code of ethics policy for all staff to sign. Place reminder signage. To create a committee to approve and carry out future software purchases, sign and understand the licensing agreements, plans, and things like that. Implement a digital literacy curriculum for students. Provide training to teachers on copyright laws for educators in the Creative Commons. Host an annual wish list night where staff can share their items, reasons for their wish, and expected cost prior to the PTA fundraising. And then host a celebration night to show the PTA and patrons how their fundraising dollars were being spent. Let's talk about the pros and cons. To go with Plan 1, the pros are that most people are happy and the kids are using the technology. It's also inexpensive to purchase flash drives. Cons, you're intentionally violating the copyright laws, and this is a compromise integrity of all stakeholders involved. Plan 2, pros, we're not wasting time and money that's used to copy the software. There's more kids using technology, and there's no more future violations. Cons, less availability to the new programs. The staff feels inconvenienced at the change, and there is a risk of repetition if you're already using some old copied programs. Going with Plan 3, the pros. There are no violations of copyright laws. You have better education of staff, and those signs provide visible reminders. The cons of Plan 3, less kids have access. You will have to go back to the lab schedule, and some of the staff may be upset at the changes. The pros of Plan 4, there are no violations, better education of staff, visible reminders. There's the potential for more licenses, and there's less chance of repetition. The cons, there is some cost involved in purchasing licenses, and you could have backlash from those who think that they're not using money as effectively. The pros with going with Plan 5, you're following all the laws, all stakeholders are involved, it is a proactive approach, a committee means that there's shared decision making, the students are educated, and there's training available for staff. The cons of this plan, it will take time to implement all the parts. You will be spending a little bit of money, and change always causes backlash. Let's talk about plan development. So first, focus groups were called in. 1, plans were presented to staff in an open discussion. The teachers wanted to be compliant and ethical, but concerns with time and budget. They did agree that changes needed to be made. Second, the school board reviewed each of the plans and agreed that while making the correct changes may take time, it was ultimately the best choice for the future of our district. And third, the PTA and patrons were presented all options in an open meeting. They were open to change, but wanted information on the costs for the student curriculum and staff training. They liked the idea of the patron events twice a year. The school board used the focus groups in the information, and they chose to proceed with plan number 5. They tasked Mr. Sample with crafting a plan that was very clear and included resources. Let's talk about implementation. This is the action plan. The action plan was put Plan 5 into place are listed in the chart below. All additional resources follow this chart. This is a fluid action plan, and the timelines can be adjusted with board approval as work is completed. The first step is to eliminate the copies. This will happen in the first year by the principal and staff. The resources are the time to collect and destroy the copies, and the evaluation is that the staff will check with the principal and the flash drives will be gone. Action step 2 is to establish a tech committee. This will happen in year 1. It will include the principal, the librarian, a K2 rep, a 3-5 rep, and a 6-8 rep. The resources needed are time to meet, a duty list, the resources and training as needed, possibly money for additional training. The evaluation is that the committee will report to the board quarterly, and classroom reps will be on a rotational schedule, starting with K2 and then 3-5 and then 6-8. Plan step 3 is to acquire about additional licenses. This will happen in year 1 by the tech committee. It will take time to call and contact information for the software companies, and it could involve money for additional licenses. The evaluation portion is to collect surveys and data for the use of the programs to determine the need and prioritize the allocation of money for licenses, and this would be reviewed annually. Action step 4 is visible signage in the building. This will happen by creating the signs in year 1 and making sure they're implemented by year 2 by the tech committee. It will take time to plan and create materials for the signs and the hanging and examples of the signage for them to use. The evaluation part is just to check for wear and tear on the signs and replacement if necessary, and then also to determine if updates to wording are necessary as things change in our technology world. The next step in our action plan is board policy review. This will happen in year 1 by the school board and the administration. It will take time in the board policies and current copyright laws. The evaluation is to review and amend on a regular policy rotational schedule. The next action step is the Code of Ethics policy. This will be created in year 1 and implemented in year 2 by the school board, admin, and staff. It will take time to write and examples of a policy, and the evaluation is to be reviewed as other board policies, but also all staff will review and sign annually. The digital literacy curriculum will be put into place in year 2. This will be done by the board, the tech committee, the staff, and the students. It will take time to explore examples of curriculum to choose from and the implementation and training time. The current board policy on curriculum review will be used as an evaluation tool, informal administration walkthroughs and notes, and tech committee discussions. Training will happen in year 2 with the teachers and staff. It could take time, possibly substitutes, maybe some money, and also materials. Staff feedback will be used in evaluation, PDP toolbox reflections, and also implementation in lesson plans through observations and walkthroughs. And finally, the events portion of the plan. This includes the wish list night and the celebration night. This will happen in year 2. It will include the PTA, the patrons, staff, and students. It will take time to plan, the gym to use for the event, the communication for the event, and possibly refreshments. Everyone loves punch and cookies. The evaluation tool will be a survey of the patrons and then informal conversations. Resources, you see listed here, we have a couple examples of signage and copyright laws, an example of a code of ethics policy, some free digital literacy and copyright training, resources, and curriculum. So as Mr. Sample presents these, he will be able to show that we can do a lot of this without a cost involved. And then also some additional resources through Creative Commons. The problems that could be anticipated along the way. First, the plan has a built-in evaluation tool so that if revisions can be made, that is a possibility. Second, the Code of Ethics policy is signed, so any future violations can be handled through board protocol. And third, any staff or patrons with questions or concerns will be able to meet and visit in a non-confrontational environment. Mr. Sample will respectfully listen and discuss concerns fairly, keeping in mind the best interests of the students and the St. Regis school community as a whole. My concluding thoughts. The operations and management of a school district has many levels. Creating a strong foundation helps promote the future and current success and well-being of all students and staff within that system. Needs change within a system due to technology advancements, budgetary issues, or even specific circumstances. In this example, it was a copyright violation that caused the need for a new plan. With the implementation of this plan, the district will see these positive outcomes. Communication. All people, students, staff, patrons are more informed and able to be part of the learning process in various ways. Technology. With the digital literacy and copyright training and curriculum adoption, students and staff are able to increase their use of technology in a responsible way. Management and school local governance. With the creation of the technology community and management of budget, resources and decisions are made as a team, making a stronger community and school culture. Data-informed and equitable plans. The evaluation component for each section of this plan allows the plan to improve and develop as the needs change in the future, and policies, laws, and regulations. Addressing school board policies and adding a code of ethics keeps the system in check with the law. Relevancy. Completing a case study on copyright infringement and resource management was extremely relevant. First, I live in a very small rural community. There are about 200 students in our K-12 building. There's a strong sense of community, a supportive booster club, and often budget restrictions. One thing our booster club does each year is present every teacher with $100 to spend in their classroom how they see fit. Here is where I picture Mrs. Lynn buying the flash drives that Mr. Sample didn't know about. As a classroom teacher, I would be lying if I said that in 25 years of teaching, I could say that I've never copied something that probably shouldn't have been copied. Studying law this month has given me so much to think about. As a district leadership, building leadership team member, I am allowing myself to be in a position to be a leader, a resource, and a positive example to my colleagues. Working through the development of a comprehensive technology plan was a good exercise to consider all parties involved in the creation and implementation of any plan. For my reflection, looking at this project as the culmination of a very intense month of studying school law, I have realized several things. First, I will be more diligent about copyright. For example, I just learned why PNG files are required. This is a simple change I can teach my students as they create Google Slides. I'll also be going through my own materials at school to determine they are all within fair use and copyright laws to use. I like the fair use checklist that I found online, and I've saved a couple that I could refer to. As I crafted the plan for this case study, I was actually creating a plan that I think has the potential to work for our district. Reading our policies so closely the last 4 weeks has left me with some questions and concerns of policies that may need clarified. Copyright is one of these policies. I would like the opportunity to visit with the admin team and see if we can look at making some of the changes similar to the plan that I created. While the speed of this course and the sheer volume of information have been overwhelming at times, I have truly learned so much. I believe that I've become not only more knowledgeable, but that knowledge will help me approach situations with an open mind and a willingness to learn. These are the references I used throughout this presentation, and I thank you for listening.